everybody. Welcome again to another episode of My Boomer Buddies podcast, where we tell it like it was and is. Today is a very special day because we have a new Boomer Buddy on who knows so much about music, so much about pop culture. He started off being a great friend with fellow Boomer Buddy Joe Chesley, and here he is today, Mr. Ron Tunby, also known as Toons. Welcome to My Boomer Buddies podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here.
And it's been long awaited. We talked last year when we went to a ball game together as a group of buddies, and finally a year later, here we are. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, you know what? I always wanted to be in the record business. I loved music, and I thought eventually I'd get to be like a sales guy for a major label. And they had a few of those in the Twin Cities. And I thought, well, to do that, I'm going to have to start at the bottom level. And so I got a job at a record store. And I didn't think when I got this job, it was about selling music and talking about music with customers. I didn't think about meeting people. Well, turns out I met a few people just working in a record store. I can't believe the people I've met. I can be friendly and personable, but I'm incredibly shy and hesitant to talk to some of these people because we're in awe of them. Both my wife, Barbara, and I. Turns out, just working at a record store, I met some great people. I'd like to talk about meeting the people that I admire so much.
Brushes with Fame. We did one last year with Joe Chesley and Terry Walsh with Brushes with Fame, and it was a popular topic. And Ron, when I talked to you and the Brushes with Fame with people, I found them very interesting. And you're going to go down a list of a few. And I will say again, I'll kind of repeat what you said. You are very respectful of their time. Don't get to ask all the questions you want to. You're just grateful to have met them. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, that's just it. That's like, you want to say something, how much you admire them and maybe ask questions. But then again, you know that they get this every day, all day long when they run into people with cliches. And there's that famous SNL sketch with Chris Farley talking to Paul McCartney, and I didn't want to look goofy like that. So I kept it, fairly respectful.
And you also want to try to touch the human side of them too.
Yeah, exactly.
If you can. All right, name somebody. Let's talk about the first one on your list.
Here's the thing. There were some brief encounters, and I just, but they're incredibly memorable. And part of it is getting to know Terry. From my friendship with Joe, and then with you, I got to meet James Walsh, and that's just amazing. And just a brief encounter, working in the record store, a guy came in and said, and we were talking about music, and he said, I'm in a band. And I said, what's the band? And he said, well, I'm the horn player, I believe it was trumpet player, for the James Walsh Gypsy Band album that came out in like the mid-'70s. And it's like, wow. And there, years later, I meet James Walsh. Unfortunately, I didn't get to hang out with him as much as you guys did. I'm envious of you guys because you got to really know him on a personal level. Before I believe it was probably his last show at the Medina, Joe and I were having dinner, and James came in and sat with us. And I kind of melt, and he's like, oh, yeah, you worked for the Heilicher Brothers, which was the company I later worked for, which the name changed to Pickwick International. But he's like, yeah, I knew Amos Heilicher. And it's like, oh, my goodness. And we talked for a bit, but then he had to get going because they were going to perform. It's like, I would have loved to have spent more time talking to him about the experiences he had. But anyway, so I met his trumpet player from his band, and then I got to meet James. And just working in this record store. I was on 7th and Hennepin in downtown Minneapolis, and it wasn't that great of a record store compared to the head shops I went to.
So I should explain that James Walsh was a keyboard player and one of the great musical brains for arranging the Gypsy albums. He was in Gypsy for many years, and then when they kind of broke up, they lost some members. He carried on the tradition, and we were lucky enough to make friends with him. And his wife, Terry Walsh, is a Boomer Buddy. She's on the show regularly. So if you're a regular viewer, that's the connection there. And Toons was lucky enough to meet him, and he touches everybody right away. He was
unbelievable.
He passed away 3 years ago, and we're both blessed for that. Brush with Fame. And now you've got your next one you want to cover?
Judy Collins came in, and she was a folk singer, pretty big in the 60s and 70s, I believe. And if you know the Crosby, Stills and Nash song "Sweet Judy Blue Eyes." Well, there was a reason they called that song "Sweet Judy Blue Eyes" because they were friends with her, and her eyes were. That's what I remember. And I probably went up and I said, "I'm a big fan," but actually, I didn't know her music. I wasn't into folk music at the time, but still, it was nice that she came in and her eyes were stunningly blue. I will never forget that. And then a couple other people that walked in. One of the Spinners walked in, and they were a great rhythm and blues group from the 70s. And that was pretty cool that he came in. And then Joe Chesley and I worked for a record distributor, and they had these big conventions. And I remember, and they used to get top notch bands to play at these conventions. And they were actually at the Playboy Resort in Lake Geneva and Great Gorge, New Jersey. And they had like the OJs perform for us, and Dickie Betts performed. Later on, they had little parties in their resort. And I remember going into a room and it was pretty crowded. And Dickie Betts from the Allman Brothers, the guitarist, was sitting on a bed. And it's like, all I did was just say hi and I love your music, but just think that Dickie Betts was in this hotel room. So the next, probably one of my favorite musicians was Todd Rundgren, who had his own hits of "We Gotta Get You a Woman" and "Hello, It's Me" and a few others, decent songs. He's still performing. Well, I became a big fan of his, and this would have been about the 76 or 77. He was touring, and I wanted to see him, and I hadn't seen him perform at that time. And he was in Omaha, Nebraska. And I was telling a friend of mine who wasn't even a fan of Todd's, I said, yeah, I'd like to go to Omaha, but, and he said, let's go. So we jumped in the car, drove to Omaha early one morning, the morning of the concert. And we figured we could get tickets once we got down there. This is, like I say, 76, 77. We went to the venue and during the day, and for some reason, and we were walking around and we were in the back of the building and the door was open. So we walked in and there wasn't anybody around, and we actually sat in the middle of this small theater where he was going to play, and we're just kind of sitting there talking, I don't know, 2 or 3 in the afternoon. All of a sudden, Todd Rundgren and his band walked in and started the sound check. And we're sitting there going, we're listening to Todd Rundgren. He's playing just for us, but he wasn't. So that was pretty cool. And then we saw the concert. And after the concert, we stood in line to get autographs. And when I got up there, I said, Todd, I love the concert. And we drove down from Minneapolis to see you. And I'll never forget it. He looked at me and said, things must be pretty boring in Minneapolis. So I've seen Todd now, and actually Joe Chesley, another boomer buddy. We've seen him, I don't know, 4 or 5 times together. I've probably seen him close to 20 times because I love his music. One time he had made an interactive CD. Now, I'm not much of a computer guy. In fact, Rick's helped me out a lot with this stuff. But he made one of the first interactive CDs ever, and this probably was in the early to mid 80s. Todd loved video and technology and audio technology. So they talked about this CD, and then we got in line for an autograph, and my wife Barbara and we got up to the front of the line, and he said, okay, we had the CD, and he said, I'll autograph, what's your name? And I said, well, autograph it to Toons. And he said, Toons is the driving cat, which is a reference to SNL. And I said, no, it's actually Toons as in songs. And so that was my encounter with Todd. Big fan.
He was always an innovator. He was a producer as long as a performer, and he was in a band called the Nas. I think that's pretty cool that you got to hear his response to you being from Minneapolis. And I will tell the viewers that we are out of Minneapolis, St. Paul area. So
Right.
some of the references that Toons is brought up about Medina, that is a place in the western suburbs up here where we see a lot of bands come through and performers. And we'll probably hear that name mentioned at least one more time. Good for you. You had a good experience with a guy you've seen many times. And one more thing I'm going to say is I want to get you and Joe Chesley on and talk about the concerts you've been to. I've heard some of those stories, and I want the viewers out there, the world, to hear some of these stories. They're good.
I should have written all these down. I wish I would have. And I've kept a few ticket stubs, but I literally, from the time I was in that record store and then working for the record distributor till about 1982. So within about 7 years, I bet I saw well over 200 concerts. Some I paid for, but quite a few I just got tickets for. I remember seeing three major concerts in 1 week. It was The Who, and I don't remember the other ones, but I remember thinking, I just saw The Who and two other concerts and huge. But anyway, yeah, someday, yeah, concert stories.
Do you have any more you want to cover?
Sure. David Lee Roth. When he had left the Van Halen band, he had his own band, and Steve Vai was his guitarist, who was one of the more well-respected, renowned guitarists that's played with a lot of different people. And so Joe and we were working for the record distributor, so I got tickets to that concert. And to be honest with you, I was a Van Halen fan, but I don't know if I would have actually paid to see that concert. But we got tickets, so we went, and it was great. We had a great time. It was at the old Met Sports Center, which I grew up a couple miles away from. So we saw the concert, and then afterwards, because we knew the people that were the main record buyer for our company, which she was kind of a big shot because she bought all the records that we distributed. She invited us to go into the back room, and it wasn't their private dressing room, but it was a larger room in back of the Met Sports Center after the concert to meet and greet David Lee Roth. So while we were in line to shake his hand, I remember asking the buyer, tell me something about David Lee Roth that people don't know. And she said, well, that beautiful long blonde hair he's got is a wig. So I thought, oh, that's cool, but I'm not going to bring that up. So when we got up to meet David and shook his hand, I just, I didn't want to take any time, but I said he had set up a stage in back of the arena where he played at the Met Sports Center where the North Stars played. They had set up a stage, so at some point later in the concert, he actually went back on that stage to sing. And I told him, I thought that was so cool that you gave the people in back a great view of you and your singing, and he appreciated that. So after the concert, and Joe told about this story, and I see it just a little differently than he did.
Go
He
ahead.
told the story about we went across the street to a hotel bar and thought, oh, let's just have a drink before we go home. And we're sitting in this bar, and I don't think there was any other people in there, just us and the bartender. And all of a sudden, David Lee Roth walks in. And we go, hey, David, we were just at your concert. So he sat down and we talked, and it was like talking to a new friend. It was amazing. And like Joe said, he told us he loved to do adventurous things. He went into the Amazon jungle with some of his friends.
Wow.
Just unbelievable. And he was short. And we just thought it was bizarre that he just was all alone. He didn't have any of his squad with him, guys, or certainly, you thought he would have had some women with him. So we sat there, and I remember he had a double Jack Daniels and smoked 2 cigarettes. So I don't know how long we were with him, maybe 20 minutes to a half hour, and then he left. And I picked up those 2 cigarette butts thinking, it's a souvenir. David Lee Roth smoked these cigarettes, and I had them in my pocket. And we went across the street after that and got gas at a gas station. So this must have been, I don't know, a good hour after the concert. And I recognized 2 young couples that were there getting gas the same time we were, and they were at the concert. So knowing that these young couples were at the concert, I told the 2 young girls, I said, hey, we just talked to David Lee Roth and had drinks with him. And I pulled out of my pocket these 2 cigarette butts, and I said, hey, these were smoked by David Lee Roth. I pulled them out of my pocket. There was no other reason I'd have them there than that story. They believed it, and it was true. So I go, do you want them? And they thought I was giving them gold. And I remember their boyfriends were like, who's this guy? But anyway, so that's that story. David Lee Roth. Yeah, we'll never forget how I met him.
That's a great story, Toons.
This is my favorite of all the people I've met. I was working in the record store, and we had big displays. I don't know what kind of store it was before it was a record store, but it had huge display windows that were probably, I bet, at least 10 to 12 feet long. And, they were probably 6 feet tall, and there was like 3 or 4 of them. And back in those days in the record business, that was the heyday of selling records, and we had 8 tracks and cassettes. And so the record companies spent thousands and thousands of dollars on promotional material, and they give them to stores like us, and we could make displays with them. And we had these used display windows, which were kind of unique. I'm not very artistic, but the boss gave me that job, is to do that. And there was a group called Natural Gas that Joey Mullen from Badfinger, who I was a big fan of Badfinger. After they had quit, he was in a group called Natural Gas with some other superstars. I know that we'd gotten literally 50 empty album covers, and I put those probably on the wall and somehow made some sort of display in the window. And within a day or two, I remember it was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and this attractive woman walked in and came up to me and said, "Who made that display window?" And I said, "Well, I did." And she said, "Oh, that's pretty cool. I'm married to Joey Mullen." Well, I am like, "Joey Mullen from Badfinger? You're married to him?" And it turns out that, yeah, he married this woman named Kathy who was from Minneapolis, and he spent a lot of time here. And she had said, "Well, you know what? I'm going to tell him he's out doing some shopping." This is downtown Minneapolis. "And he's doing some shopping. I'll let him know that you've got a display window of his latest album." So I said, "Oh, great." I really didn't think it would happen. Sure enough, within a few hours, he walks in the store. Badfinger was a group that was the first group that was signed on the Apple label with the Beatles, and George Harrison helped them with their albums. Paul McCartney wrote their first hit, so they were from Liverpool originally. So they hung out with the Beatles, and they had big hits no matter what. And Baby Blue, and I had all their albums, and I loved them. So we chatted for a while, and he told me the unfortunate story about their lead singer committing suicide. Very sad. But we chatted for a while, and it was like, oh, this is absolutely amazing. And he actually invited me to a party that later that night, some record party, but I wasn't able to go to it, which, I'm kind of bummed because he just seems so friendly and warm. So it turns out that he played in Minneapolis a few more times. They did tribute shows for George Harrison, and one was at Famous Dave's on George Harrison's birthday. And I saw him there, but I didn't talk to him because I'm too shy. But after a few years, we found out he was playing in a casino in Danbury, Wisconsin. It was the St. Croix Casino, and this was January 13th of last year, 2024. So I asked my wife, Barbara, if she wanted to go, and she said, sure. So it was a 2-hour drive, but we listened to Badfinger songs and Natural Gas songs on the way up and saw the show, and it was great. And then I stood in line to see him again. And there was about 30 people in line at least, and we were about the fifth or sixth person. I just told myself, Ron, don't babble. Don't babble. Just get the autograph. Tell him how you met him originally at the record store. And I told him that story. He thought it was good. It happens to be a picture of this truck inside the Natural Gas album. And apparently, I don't know anything about trucks, and I don't know why they had this truck in the middle of this album. But he told me about that truck, and it was a famous truck that eccentric billionaire Howard Hughes had. And he just loved talking about that truck. And I just, thought, I hope these people behind me aren't getting upset that I'm taking up his time. It was just such a joy to meet him. Anyway, that was my very famous. I talked to him and shook his hand. Someone that was that prolific songwriter and singer, and he was the lead guitarist of the group. And the harmonies, they were famous. They were like the Beatles. They were famous for their harmonies and their songs. Unfortunately, they didn't last very long. Yeah, Joey Mullen. I'll never forget it.
We've touched on Badfinger in the past
Right.
on My Boomer Buddies podcast, and Evans and Ham. It is tragic what happened to them. They were mismanaged. I consider them like another Beatle type group.
Right. Oh, exactly. And they weren't really, it's not like they were a copycat or anything, but they had the vocal harmonies. They were attractive guys. And their songs are incredible. I mean, their songs were wonderful, and they wound up, especially in those days back in the 60s and early 70s, they probably met everybody.
Yeah, and Joey lived in the Twin Cities, like you said. His wife's from the area, so he spent a lot of time here. And unfortunately, he passed away recently.
Yes.
But we do have his music for memories. And you have a few memories of him that you shared.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for doing that. That's
Sure.
awesome. I have one You already mentioned James Walsh, who I became really good friends with before he died. My late brother Randy, he and I would go to concerts, and Roger McGuinn, we went to see him. He had a solo CD out, and we parked over by the baseball field, and we're walking over to the Guthrie, I think it was, and coming down the hill by himself, just with this confident gait, is Roger McGuinn. Now my brother got excited when he'd see celebrities, and he started, oh, it's Roger McGuinn of the Birds. He started kind of doing that, and I just kind of hit him in the ribs, and I just said, just easy, easy.
Relax.
We walked up to him and just said, "Hey, how you doing?" He goes, "Hey, how you doing?" It was a minor brush, but still it was a brush with fame. And it's cool to see somebody like him or Joey Mullen who affected the music world with their material and their talents. And that was pretty fun. Another time, Randy, my brother and I went to Medina Ballroom, where you talked about seeing Gypsy there. And we were on the side of the stage, and it was an oldies review. You had Gary Lewis. You had the guy that sang Precious and Few, and Time Won't Let Me. He was in two different bands, but he was selling aluminum siding or something on houses. And then Oldies Tour came in, and Alex Chilton and Ronnie of Ronnie and the Daytonas are the ones I remember. But my brother and I were on the side of the stage, and Alex Chilton and Gary Lewis were standing about 4 feet from us, kind of eavesdropping. And, you know, my brother Randy's getting all excited, and I overheard Gary Lewis when Ronnie of Ronnie and the Daytonas was up there, and he was just playing an old beat up acoustic guitar with a lavalier microphone hooked on there, and he was kind of, teasing him to Eric, look at his setup, and in my mind, I thought, what a dick.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Alex Chilton, I don't remember him saying anything bad, but Randy took up the courage and walked up to Alex Chilton and said, "Oh, I'm a big fan of you. Thanks for what you did for us. You formed our lives with your music." That's my brother. He got real excited about music and everything. But that was a cool brush with fame to see these people who performed on records that we grew up with.
Yeah, meeting people like that, and especially with a little extended visit with David Lee Roth and Joey Mullen. And yeah, most of the time they're normal people. Now, I'm sure you can find some of these people that are buttheads. And for the most part, everybody just accepted that, hey, we like you, and we just, we appreciate everything you've done. I've got some other time, maybe we talk about, I've met a few sports people that I admire. In fact, probably the most famous person was Andy McPhail of the Twins, the general manager. That's for another show.
Way to tease that, Toons. We'll
Yeah,
do another show, Brush with Fame, with sports figures. But
yeah,
I'll tell you what, viewers out there, listeners, send us a comment or an email and let us know what brushes with fame you have had. We're very interested in knowing that and the backstories, because it's kind of a big deal. Yes, they're just people, but they're people that have done some things that the whole world or a lot of the world has heard of. And it's pretty cool to, have some interaction with them. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. A lot of viewers, they watch, but they don't subscribe. Also, you can email me at myboomerbuddies4, the number 4, at gmail.com, and let us know what you think. And we're always open to content ideas. Somebody asked for a show on the raspberries, and I like them. I like them a lot. I think we'll do a show on the raspberries at some time. I wore that out, that 45, well, all their 45s I wore out. But yeah, the raspberries were really good. We'll make that happen for that viewer. The raspberries song, Go All the Way, I played the heck out of that. I think I even bought a second copy.
I just wanted to say I saw the Raspberries, or I saw Eric Carmen in concert, the leader of the Raspberries. It
Yes.
was so much better than I ever could have imagined. I'll never forget that concert. So we're going to end it now, and I'll just say it's been my pleasure, and thanks for having me. I love talking about music. I love talking about tunes.
Well, Ron, I am happy that you and I finally made this happen. I think technology to boomers can be kind of daunting, but you know what? We figured it out. I figured it out a couple years ago, and I still have things I'm
You
learning
got
every
it.
day. I'm retired. I do this for fun, and I like to get other people on here that may be retired and they have a flexible schedule to record. And Ron's one of those guys. And we need to get Joe Chesley on here too, because he's got a lot of stories, and we'll make that happen as well. So, Ron, thanks again for coming on. and you're welcome anytime. For my Boomer Buddies podcast, I'm Rick Reed with Ron Tunby, also known as Toons. Until next time, we'll see you
around the block.